Hey, we're recording.
Good afternoon, Cosmos. I'm joined here today with our Hamtramck Chief of Police, Chief Moyes,
Hi.
Lieutenant Molesky, and then our City Prosecutor, Mr. Wayne.
Good morning.
The purpose of this video is twofold. One is our goal is to promote school safety with information in the video, and the second one is we're also promoting sound, safe decision making. Looking at some of the incidents that have taken place around both the country and our city over the last several years, it's clear that a lot of young people and students, even adults, aren't aware of what the laws are. So some of our goals today are to make all students aware of what the laws are. And I'll start off by saying this. In recent years, we've had a ton of well-publicized tragedies throughout our country, between mass shootings in public places and schools. So maybe we start off there, and I'll ask Chief this question. Chief, what is the police department doing to keep our school and our community safe? And then the second part of the question is, what is all of our staff and students' responsibility in keeping our school and community safe?
Sure. So the number one priority of the Hamtramck Police Department and all police departments is community safety. You know, we're constantly out in the community. We're responding to calls for service. We're patrolling around the city, around the schools. Our officers are well trained. They go to a lot of training classes. They're keeping up to date on current trends and things that are happening around the country. We watch that very closely. As far as the students and schools' responsibility is to report suspicious behavior. You know, and they've done studies, and in over 80% of school violent issues that have happened recently, at least one person knew about it before the event, and they were too afraid to report it, whether it to be labeled as a snitch or fear of retaliation. But if people are reporting this type of behavior, you know, it helps stop that before something very tragic happens. The state of Michigan and other states around the country do have websites available where you can report anonymous tips, and that's going to be OK, the number 2, and then SAY, so OK to say. And that can also be texted anonymously to 652-729. And their motto is stop the silence and help end the violence. So we just need people to report suspicious behaviors and, you know, let us do our job so we can keep the community safe together.
And I think that's something our country's gotten a lot better at over the course of the last year is reporting. If you see something, say something. We have students come to our office on a weekly basis. If they see something suspicious or hear something that doesn't settle well with them, report it. And we'll make sure all students have the OK to say information to report that out as well.
Yes, I was able to order some information online, so as soon as I have it available, I'll bring that over to the school. They have stickers and posters and things like that. And when I was researching this, some of the statistics that came up were over 15,000 threats and other suspicious incidents were reported last year alone to the OK to say.
Awesome.
So it's definitely working and people are using it, so we just want to continue to get that message out there.
Awesome. My second question is for Lieutenant Molesky as well as the Chief. When it comes to making a fake threat or a hoax threat to a school building or really a public place or a private place, or secondly, bringing any type of weapon into a public school, private school, what are specific consequences that people would face for either one of those actions?
Well, I can tell you one thing that we've worked closely with the prosecutor, and it's around the world, is that if you make a fake threat to a school, business, or you bring in a weapon, that you're going to really mess up your life. For one, it's automatic. You're going to be brought down to juvenile, so you're going to be locked up as no matter what age you are. You know, you're looking at consequences from the school, possibly expulsion, so you can't go to school. The real big thing is the Wayne County prosecutor is going to charge you to the fullest extent. You're going to bring all the police resources in. You're going to bring the Wayne County prosecutor. So you're not talking a slap on the wrist. There's a very good possibility. Say you're 14 years old, you may be in jail until you're 18 years old. Or if you're 17, that's considered an adult in Michigan. You can do up to 20 years for a terroristic threat. So
something even it's a joke. You've got a group of friends hanging out. You decide to make a prank phone call, looking up to 10 to 20 years and a felony that you have to report on your record for the rest of your life.
100%. I mean, your life can be ruined by one stupid decision to go online or to make a threat. Your whole life can be ruined, whether you go to apply for a job after you've been in jail for 15 years, because it's taken very seriously from the prosecutor's office to the police. I mean, we're going to do every resource. And if you do it, you're going to get caught, because we are going to, if it's something involving the school or anything else, we're going to put everyone we have on it until, you know, like you said last year, somebody did something within 3 hours, we had them, because we were going to put every resource. So you're not going to get away with it either. So you got to make that clear that you make that mistake, you are going to go to jail.
I think that's important to note. 2 years ago, when we did have an incident of a hoax threat, which was made as a joke by a student, they screened the phone call thinking it wouldn't be able to be identified. Our police were able to find out who that was in a matter of hours. Student was charged with a felony, expelled from school immediately, and faced years of jail time. So
I think the bottom line is there are no joking threats. There are no humorous threats. It's not funny. It's not a joke.
Another thing important to note is it doesn't matter, even for the prosecutor's office and for court, if you had the ability to carry out that threat, whether you own a weapon or not, whether you were 2 cities away and said you were going to do it in 5 minutes, it doesn't matter. They take it very seriously, and it doesn't matter whether you have the ability to carry out that threat. It's still a crime just to make the threat alone.
So you spoke about weapons, and we talked about specific consequences for hoax threats or fake threats. What about are we talking about specific consequences for bringing any sort of weapon into a building, school building?
Yes.
100%. It's very much the same thing as police take it very seriously, but the prosecutors too. If you bring a weapon to school, you will be going down to juvenile, and if you're 17, you're going to be charged with a felony as an adult, but you're going to be going on juvenile, and they take it very seriously. So the consequences are going to be jail time, or at the very least, like I said, if you're a juvenile, you could spend from 14 to 18 in juvenile. It comes down to that.
Yes.
Because it's a very serious threat to bring a weapon into school.
And there's a lot of things that are classified as weapons. I mean, we all think of guns and knives and things like that, but there's electronic devices like tasers, stun guns, really anything that can be fashioned as a weapon. Bringing in a wood pipe or a metal pipe or a baseball bat with the intent of carrying it as a weapon would all be considered and fall under that same category. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional thing of what we think of as a weapon.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because we occasionally have students who say they don't feel safe walking around the community, whether it be walking home from school or at night walking around the community to a job. What do you recommend that students do to feel safe besides carrying a weapon?
So I think the number one thing would be to always be aware of your surroundings. Walk in groups when you can, but be aware of your surroundings. Don't be on your phone. Don't be listening to headphones and really loud music to where you're not paying attention to what's going on. And that's even important for walking in traffic and crossing, because people don't hear cars coming and things like that. But things like that, and report any suspicious behavior. If you think someone's following you, go into a place that's open for business, like a store or something like that, and ask them to call the police. It's very important to report those things immediately. Don't go home and tell 5 friends and tell your parents. Report it to the police immediately so we can check the area and we can look at, if there's somebody suspicious hanging around. But so be aware of your surroundings, report suspicious behavior, pay attention. And
strength in numbers is always, if you're walking to and from school, if you can walk, hey, I'm going out with my friends. Well, if you have one person, but if you go in strength in numbers, it's always a better thing, even as adults, if you feel that way. But just make sure have your number programmed to call the police if there's an incident, and we'll get there fast.
Okay.
Having what you believe is a weapon, isn't always going to protect you. A lot of times there's cases where that's turned around and used against a person, especially someone who's not trained to use something, and it ends up backfiring and gets used against them. So that's certainly not the best way to walk around just to feel safe, is by carrying a weapon.
Okay. So this next topic here, I'm going to switch gears a little bit away from weapons and threats. And this topic is one that I've found, and I think even just looking at the news and students around the country, I found that students, I think, are a little more naive or ignorant about the laws when it comes to this. And it has to do with smartphones, taking inappropriate photos, sexting, and then distributing inappropriate photos or sex messages from underage, minors, basically folks who are not adults, who's almost everybody in this building. Let's talk about specific consequences, felonies, and what the law says when it comes to that type of thing.
Do you want to open on that one, or you want to?
What, you want to start with the legal points?
Sure. So, a lot of times it'll start, as maybe someone sending something to a boyfriend or girlfriend, thinking it's only going to go to that person. And then, as the story goes, they break up a week later, or somebody finds that photo, or retaliation, and pretty soon it's sent to everybody in the school, or it's posted online. That kind of stuff ruins lives. It's illegal to possess those type of photograph of anyone under the age of 18. Even the person sending it technically is distributing what they call child pornography.
When you say illegal, are we talking a felony?
Yes, we're talking felony consequences. Distributing child pornography material. You start sending it across social media, then you're crossing state lines, and it becomes a federal crime, which has even more penalties assigned to that.
So I think that's one point that you just hit on that I think a lot of students at schools across the country are really not aware of. So sending a picture of an underage person, under age 18, we're talking about a felony for, what would be the term for that felony?
It's child pornography.
Yeah,
distributing child
pornography.
pornography.
Up to several years, at least, not more than 10 years in jail.
10 years in jail.
Yeah.
Okay.
Easily.
Okay.
And before the prosecutor weighs in on a lot of that stuff is the fact that I want to make it clear that in this day and age, people think they can send something and then delete it. Your footprint is out there. Nothing in this day and age can be sent and it's there. So you may think you delete it, it goes away in 10 seconds. The minute it's sent, you cannot get rid of it. So that is my advice, is just stay away from it. I mean, I know it's a hard thing to do with kids, but you put something out there and you delete 2 seconds later, it is out there. And not only is it out there now, but you go apply for a job 20 years later, somebody can look into it and see something that you put there, and you may get fired from your job or lose your job. So anything, especially pictures of new baby, but anything you put on that platform can affect you the rest of your life, even though you're only 15. So you got to really think, and I really would advise against putting anything on there that's going to hurt you, but especially when we're going into this, prosecutor's going to talk about the child porn or the new pictures of underage people.
Okay.
It has tragic consequences too. I mean, it causes humiliation and bullying, and there's been students that have committed suicide over this of finding out that their picture was sent to multiple people. So it can have some very tragic consequences as well. Not just legal consequences.
To touch upon what Chief Moise Lieutenant Molesky discussed, depending on the circumstances, mere possession of these photographs is in and of itself a crime. Each time a photograph is distributed, what's called publishing, each time that is a crime. A good rule of thumb is not knowing a photograph, not knowing the identity of a photograph of an individual that you're looking at. You don't know what the age of that person is. There's no concept of consent, because if they're underage especially, they can't give their consent. It doesn't matter if they say, I'm okay with it. Legally, they don't have that consent. And so as a rule of thumb, if anybody sends you that, delete it, report it, tell them not to send it again. And while you can't necessarily stop someone from sending you a photograph, you can certainly keep yourself from forwarding that photograph. And that's probably the most important thing you can do, in addition to reporting somebody sending you a photograph like that.
Okay, thank you. And then the final thing I want to touch on, after school issues throughout the community, issues that have faced Hamtramck are loitering in privately owned areas after school, such as there's the party store here on the corner, even hanging around on school property. We deal with reckless driving, and then there's been fights after school. What are we talking about in terms of punishments for those three things?
I think the punishment can be later, but I just want the students to know that right now the police department is having a lot of issues, and we are going to start cracking down, where before you might have gotten a warning, but it's becoming to that point where if you're fighting, you are going to be taken into custody now. Or if you're, obviously we're always looking for the bad driving, but the loitering, all that stuff, the store has already told us they don't want you there. So if you are there, you are going to be taken into custody, which, we can talk about the punishment where your parents might even be able to get in trouble, but there's going to be more of a zero tolerance, because we cannot continue to show up every day to fights and everything else, because it's affecting everything else for call volume. We got other calls we got to go to, but also, it spills out. They have a small fight, but then the next day it's bigger, and we want to curb the problem before somebody gets hurt because of this nonsense. So,
okay.
The punishment, I will work a lot with you on the punishment of some of these students, and you can talk about that, the reckless driving.
Right, with respect to the penalties, there are the two biggest issues we have driving-wise in Hamtramck, which, by the way, if you don't know already, and hopefully you haven't, if you have a driving issue or if you're charged with a misdemeanor, your case will come over to 31st District Court, where I am the prosecutor. The biggest civil infraction issue we have are not stopping for school buses. That's been a big problem in this community. It continues to be. It is a public safety issue. We've had several high-profile examples that we've witnessed where fortunately nobody was killed or injured, where somebody easily could have been killed or injured. As a rule of thumb, when you see a school bus stop and you're driving, that should be your cue to stop. At the very latest, when you see a school bus activate its lights and a stop sign starts to extend from the side of the school bus, you should definitely be stopped. You should not continue to drive, irrespective of whether you see other drivers go around that school bus. It doesn't matter if the school bus is on the opposite side of the street. You need to stop. And once the school bus starts moving again, that's your cue that you can start driving again. With respect to reckless driving, a lot of things constitute reckless driving, but the most common, drag racing, people doing donuts in the middle of roads, even excessively speeding on side streets constitutes reckless driving. Reckless driving is a misdemeanor punishable by up to 90 days in jail and a $500 fine. In addition, under the Code of Ordinances in Hamtramck, we have a parental responsibility ordinance in which the parents of minors can also be held criminally responsible for their behavior. So if you, for example, at 15 or 16 are driving recklessly, your parents may also be given a citation, and so your parents may actually have to pay a fine of up to $500 and could possibly spend up to 90 days in jail. And while that may seem unfair, when we see an increase in reckless driving and other misdemeanors from minors, sometimes the best way to crack down on that kind of behavior is to address it with the parents. So that's something else to think about. Reckless driving is in and of itself a bad thing to do, but if nothing else, think about the fact that your parents could spend time in jail for something that you've done.
Okay. So I want to say thank you to our city prosecutor, our lieutenant, and our chief of police for coming out today. Again, the purpose here is just education, understanding the laws that we all live by and why they're in place. And really it goes back to our number one goal, which is safety for all. So thank you all for coming here and sharing valuable ways that we can all, basically what all of our responsibilities are in terms of keeping our school and our community safe.
Definitely, thank you for having us, and I really hope that all of you listen to this and you take this to heart and remember, these kind of behaviors have lifelong consequences, and we just all want to succeed here and we all want to keep our community safe.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.